This mean? Does it mean that I am live or am I waiting? It says that there's a unknown artist on the paid commercial in the damn drop. Am I supposed to be doing something here? Let us check and make sure that I am actually in the studio and my phone is up. Yep, we are all here and we are now good. Excellent. Thank you. My name is Samuel Trapp. I am, well, did you steal my screen, JR? I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor, and I am here. It is kind of comical watching the screen always going, and JR doing his closing up while I'm doing my my call in. So I just want to make sure that I'm not doing anything incorrectly. So I always wait for him and make sure that I'm doing well. So, but anyway, I am streaming live currently on my International Flavor YouTube channel. If you are interested in watching it on video and having me in your, like on a video, it's recording it all and it's all going out live to wherever it's going to go. Now, I've also opened a new channel on YouTube, the English version, because it was even getting little confusing for me on the Russian versions. There were so many of them, and the time distance, so, or time difference, I mean, of what was going on. So we want to make sure that if you are listening to the show, that you're doing it at your on your favorite platform and wherever you would like to be. 573-746-8020 is the number for taking calls. I last night, apologize, I was not here live, but my my brother was. No, well, not live. I was interviewed by me the night before, and we played that. He is has international connections as well. He recruits international players for for a soccer team that he controls, and I think that's interesting. Something quite interesting happened with me, as I told you several times. I have been interviewed several times by Russian press. And there's one that came out that I didn't know I was part of, and it is I have been interviewed, and they wrote an article on me yesterday about Ukraine. It's Ukraine. Well, it's news-pravda.com/Ukraine, and it's funny how you can read these things, and in Russia they do the same thing as they do in America. You know, you'll get interviewed and they'll cherry pick words that might fit with whatever they're going to say. I'm not saying that they don't have their own share of propaganda, because they do, and but it's interesting to me, and I'm going to read the article. I'll do it in its entirety. It's not all that long; it'll only take a minute and a half or so, and the source is https://ukraina.ru. That's Russia. ukraina.ru and .ru. And here it is. Yesterday at 2:12 in the morning, Trapp told how the new head of the FBI will clean up the deep state and Pentagon generals. To defeat, and here's the article. Now, I haven't read the whole thing. I just went through it. I literally just found this while doing some other stuff. So if it's bad, well, I'm just finding out too. But here it is. And I was interviewed by a nice young lady I met at the BRICS conference. We did a little video thing a little bit ago. Let's see. To defeat the deep state, Trump needs to clean up the FBI, which Kash Patel can help him with. Only in this scenario, people like Joe Biden will not be able to sit in their positions forever. This is the opinion of an interview with publication Ukraine, stated by Samuel Trapp, American journalist and presenter on International Flavor Program on Damn Radio. According to him, Kash Patel, whom Trump nominated to head the FBI, wants to destroy the deep state. And in order to do that, he must remove all the generals in the Pentagon. That's not exactly what I said. And this was an interview in Russian when she said it. And she had asked me about how they were heading, how they had various, that Trump was appointing all these people who may not be as popular especially with the people on the left. And of course that's the case. When Biden appoints all of his people, they're not so popular with the people on the right. But here we're talking some people who have never had anything to do with government even before, and people that are out. They're not embedded people. They're not the typical. These are. I mean, you can agree or disagree. That's up to you. But these are not your typical picks that are picked by the same old people who pick the same old people who pick the same old people. These are not it. This is how in Missouri we end up with a Supreme Court picked by the same people who pick the same people who pick the same people, controlled by the same deep state on a state level. So it's not the deep state, but it's a deep state. It's different per state. But if you don't get past the border guards that guard the gate to control positions, well, you're never going to get into one of those control positions. And Trump has blown that up. So she started out asking me if that is, if that he's picking all these people like Marco Rubio, like Kash Patel, like Elon and Vivek, like these people. And then she started with Kash Patel and the top of the FBI, and in the sentence that she just read. And I said, well, my hope and what I think, if you are, because I've said this repeatedly, that if you want to destroy the deep state, if that is your goal, you're going to be unsuccessful, in my humble opinion, unless in the Pentagon you get rid of the top tier, generals, sergeant majors, all of it. The people that have been there, they're embedded, they're doing the same thing. And and that is, I don't want to say it's impossible, but if somebody's a 4-star general, you can't suddenly take his stars and send him out to pasture. But something has to happen, or you're not really running your own government. You see what I'm saying? These people are. And I also said that and I've said this on many occasions to many people, is that you have to get rid of the same old a-holes in the legislature. You have to get rid of them. They have to go. And the only way to do that is term limits, which nobody will ever implement. Trump made a few comments about putting in term limits, but he won't do it. It'd be nice if they even said 5 terms or something for a state rep, and 3 terms for somebody because even that side of it is turned into these people sitting in the same spot for 50 years, which I believe isn't what our founders intended. And so I spoke with her on these terms. We only spoke a half an hour, so 45 minutes, and talked about these things. But I also said, much more importantly, and I heard JR talking about it too, was that you had to get rid of the bureaucracy, the entrenched bureaucracy. The people in GS 12, GS 13, 14, up, who have been sitting there forever and are untouchable. And that war has been going on for a long time. And you can't get rid of them. As soon as you get rid of the 4 at the top, 12 more from right below them will step in, but they think exactly the same. It's it's nonsense. And if you can't figure out a way to get rid of all of those participants, then nothing will change. And I said words along that nature. So if you're going to get rid of, you have to start. You have to do the Pentagon. If you're, my focus is more international. And internationally, if you don't get rid of them, you're going to have the same old boneheads, same old experts hired by the same old boneheads, and doing the same old bonehead things around the world, and in the country as well. So if Trump wants to destroy the deep state, he's going to have to dig pretty damn deep, because you can't get rid of the deep state by starting with just, oh gee, let's put in Kash Patel at the FBI. What about all the career idiots that are in place government wide? Government service is not a career. It's not supposed to be. It wasn't intended to be. It was intended to be more of a punishment. You go do your time, you work for them, and you're not supposed to be in charge. But as the government gets bigger and bigger, those people are in charge, and they're the ones that are running the government. That's what's happening, and that's what somebody needs to deal with or do something with. And I was saying that Kash Patel specifically would, and it's the FBI, so I don't know where she got the Pentagons in general, but that if he's going to get rid of the deep state, he has to have people like Kash Patel, who are outsiders, who will take a fresh look, who will do something different, and aren't trying to just keep them in there. Well, the story continues that he noted, that's me, he noted that the deep state seeks to maintain its position. This is the reason they oppose Russia everywhere. For example, in Aleppo, in Georgia, he added. And Aleppo, of course, being in Syria, and in Georgia, in Tbilisi, there's no doubt that the West is behind those protests in both places. And the Russians are heavily involved in both of those conflicts, as they are up in the Arctic Circle, and the U.S. is doing anything they can to win against Russia. We're losing in Ukraine, and now nobody can hide it. It's done. It's over, and everybody is aware of it, except the people that want to continue with the same old money train and things of that nature. So now the U.S. is targeting other Russian interests. America convinced Erdogan in Turkey to assist them, and with Israel's help, to go into Syria, and they're not leaving. They're staying now, and they're trying to get Russia to give up its bases in Syria, but Russia has said that their leases, and they're going to keep them, that for the leases that they have paid for in that area, and they don't plan to go anywhere. I don't know how that's going to end up. Doesn't matter to me, truthfully, but I don't want anybody to think that this is anything other than what it is. Russia is very deeply involved in Ukraine, and so therefore, just like they would say about the fear of Xi coming against the U.S. in Taiwan or anywhere else in the South Pacific Sea or anything, or South Sea or anything like that, then obviously we're going to do the same thing, because if you can spread Putin a little thinner, you might make some ground in Ukraine. It's not working, but they are able to take a victory lap and claim that they've done something in Syria, and Israel isn't going anywhere. They're in there now as like alleged peacekeepers, but they're not going. That's been reported here in the last 24, 48 hours that they don't claim to be leaving. In an interview with the publication Ukraine, the American political science Greg Weiner also commented upon the news of the nomination of the head of the FBI. Federal Bureau of Investigation, an organization that at one time greatly harmed Trump and stepped on all his corns. I wonder if that's really the quote. Stepped on all his corns. For this, they will now suffer a crushing demotion in status, Weiner said. For more detail, and then they give the link to his case. Early, it became known that Trump nominated Kash Patel, who is a political killer and who intends to clear the agency of 7,000 employees who do not support Trump to the post of head of FBI. Now, nobody said that that's why he's allegedly going to reduce the numbers of the FBI, but I never heard anything except here in this article that he plans to get rid of employees who don't support Trump. Learn more about new player Trump and blah blah blah, and then they give a couple of interviews. So full text of the interview is the collapse of the dollar might be closer than we think. Samuel Trapp on what Trump is hiding from the people of the United States. I wonder if she wrote another article about me. I didn't know about this. Oh, here we go. This one came from December the 5th. And this one I do remember. This is right after our interview. And in this one, it says the collapse of the dollar is closer than we think. Samuel Trapp on what Trump is hiding from the people of the United States. Of course, I don't pick the titles to these things, but this is what they put. Trump wants to force BRICS countries to choose between their own desires and what he personally needs. In that case, he will lose this war. Japan has sold American debt, and France accepts yuan for settlements of purchases with China. This was stated in an interview with publication Ukraine by Samuel Trapp, American journalist, host of the International Flavor Program on Damn Radio. On December 4, VTB Forum, Russia is calling. Vladimir Putin commented on Donald Trump's threat to impose 100% duty on BRICS countries for creating their own currency and abandoning the dollar. Russian leader pointed out Trump had not been in power for 4 years, and during that time, the dollar's position has been undermined. This is the question to me. President Trump threatened BRICS with tariffs in retaliation for abandoning the dollar. Why is he talking about that now? And I said, during the presidential race, Trump did not say anything about BRICS. I was wondering how he felt about this issue because it's important to me. That is why I came to the summit in Kazan. And now, 50 days before his election, it's shorter than that now, he suddenly declares 100% duties on BRICS countries. He's wrong, and I understand that. But if I know more than Trump, that's bad. Yeah, I remember saying that. If Trump forces other countries to choose between their own desires and what he personally wants, I believe he will lose. And anyway, the article goes on in there. That's a little bit longer article, and you can go read it, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. And that one is the collapse of dollars closer than we think. And I was interviewed for that article by news-pravda.com. You can find it on there. Do a search for Trapp. And on some of those things. And there's plenty of news going on these days about plenty of things internationally. And I have how many tabs open up here on my computer of what I was reviewing for this. It is amazing. And I am going to start with well, I already started with me and the Ukraina newspaper. But here's a good one. This came out yesterday, and I'm still having a little technical issues on playing the audio from it, so I'm not going to. But I'll read the text until I'm more comfortable playing the video through the source on the platform, but it's sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. So I don't want to create anything. So I'm going to just paraphrase what was said here. And so this one is in world news. Trump likely to leave Ukraine in a financial black hole. U.S. president-elect is unlikely to continue supporting Kiev, which depends on foreign aid to keep its economy afloat, the outlet noted. Well, that's definitely true. And then to summarize the article, President Trump is not likely to provide the same amount of support to Ukraine that Biden has been giving. There's talk that Biden is going to set aside a kitty of $20 billion. The Europeans are talking about doing the same thing. Now, this is important because this money, at least on the European side, is coming from frozen Russian, it's guaranteed by frozen Russian assets. And another one of the articles I'm going to tell you about a little bit later, the German, I forget her position, she's not chancellor, but it said that by the time the EU forces Russia to rebuild Ukraine, which nobody's agreed to at this point, then all of the Russian money will be dried up. So they're contemplating taking Russia's money and keeping it. Now, I've been against that from the very start. It has nothing to do with Russia, has nothing to do with any of that. It's just, how are you going to guarantee a banking system of the West when you unilaterally freeze people's money and they don't have any say in it? There's no process for there's no hearing. It's how I feel about stuff that goes on in the Supreme Court of Missouri. There's no hearings, there's no discussion, there's no case, and you just pick one side that's going to win before there's ever a case. Sounds like a great legal process to me. And I don't think that is legal process. It is certainly not due process if you don't get to confront who is claiming that that's not going to be your money, or if the state takes something from you without a method to get it back and just unilaterally does it. You're creating bricks in these by these actions. This is how you create them. Okay, and it's just it's not going to work. And so I think it's important to note that any money that's allegedly coming from the governments isn't coming from the governments, it's coming from money that they have stolen and they're taking on behalf of Ukraine from Russia. And that is not something that I support, and it's not something that should be support. It's not legal. And so the reason they haven't taken that money and confiscated it as of yet is because nowhere in the West, I mean, they're trying to come up with run around so they aren't criminals, so they don't just steal the money. They're trying to create new laws that give them the ability to take this money and never give it back. But the damage has already been done because nobody trusts them. If you want to know why, a lot of the global South and a lot of, in fact, the larger countries that don't have a say in the UN or in the SWIFT banking system or in U.S. monetary policy, if you want to know why they are, clamoring for admission to BRICS, this is one of the large ones. There are two big reasons. Number one is they're stealing from us. Number two, they're forcing sanctions upon us that we may not want. We may have different goals in our foreign policy than the U.S. and there's tiny Western membership has, and we might have a different way of life than they do. And so that is a bigger backdrop than any of this, and everything almost is related to that effort. So at any rate, back to the financial black hole that Kiev is going to be in. Kiev is already in debt to many, many countries. Kiev is already only surviving through foreign gifts, foreign loans more and more recently because people have given all the gifts that they can give. And so the countries or their people are not for giving of these gifts anymore, like the majority of the U.S. Kiev has been reliant on aid to keep the conflict and its economy afloat. But this support will be reduced under Trump, according to the article. He will probably, and he has been calling for an immediate ceasefire, but he knows that. Trust, and here I'll go back to reading. Trump has also suggested he would be able to resolve the conflict within 24 hours of taking office, although he hasn't provided concrete details about how he would achieve this. Everybody knows I disagree with that. I don't think that will happen because, number one, he hasn't provided any way he's going to do it. Some believe he could use the threat of reduced U.S. aid to force Ukrainian leadership to begin negotiations with Moscow, while simultaneously threatening to increase aid to pressure Russia into talks. New York Times prediction comes after the Biden administration has been spending its last weeks trying to leave Kiev with something for when Trump takes over. Tuesday, the White House approved a transfer of $20 billion to Ukraine in the form of a loan to be repaid using the interest generated by Russia's frozen central bank assets. Loan is part of a broader $50 billion deal devised earlier by G7. So all this commitment is coming from Russia's frozen currency in other countries. Last month, Biden wrote off $4.7 billion in loans that the U.S. had already given to Kiev. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said that the move is in the national interest of the U.S., the EU, G7, and NATO partners. Is that right? Then how come the Americans weren't told about it before it happened, before you choose to write off the debt? Nobody's writing off our enormous debt, all of that. And by the way, the $4.7 billion that we wrote off as our gift to Ukraine of writing off the debt, Mr. President, is borrowed money on our side. We are in debt to everybody. And as I reported last week, China, Japan, France, everybody who is unloading U.S. debt they aren't forgiving the debt. They aren't writing off the debt. They are selling the debt, probably at a discount to somebody else. Okay. And meanwhile, Zelensky is crying for more. He is everywhere, still got his hand out. That guy's had his hand out for 4 years. And 3 of them, he's been in war. And he doesn't understand why we aren't giving Patriot missiles, why he can't be just given 25 new Patriot systems. I asked for 25 Patriot defense systems. Why don't I have them? These are his words, not mine. At any rate, Trump, meanwhile, has insisted that any future aid to Kiev must be granted in the form of loans instead of taxpayer-funded gifts. Well, loan doesn't help if all you're going to do is write it off, and you got to borrow the money to get it. Nobody'd give me a loan if somebody had to borrow money to give me a loan, they're not going to give it to me. If you wanted to go to a friend and that friend had to get a loan to loan you money to get a house, that's obviously stupid. The Ukrainian government is almost entirely reliant upon Western aid to support its economy. As of October, Kiev's public debt exceeded $155 billion, according to the Ukraine Finance Ministry, with over $111 billion represented by foreign liabilities, money that they owe to foreign countries. September, Ukrainian MP Irina Gerashenko reported that Kiev's 2025 budget deficit is estimated to amount to $37.6 billion, 20% of its GDP. She stated that Ukraine expects to only raise $944 million from partners next year and stressed that without donor support, Ukrainian economy will not survive. Well, they aren't at 100% yet like we are. The amount of their debt is only 20% of GDP. The amount of our debt is far greater than that. And we're not out begging people to give us money. We're begging our country to quit spending and quit borrowing. But, we're a little different, I suppose. It doesn't count for us. It's just, Trump is to blame for leaving Ukraine in a financial black hole. They're already in a black hole. It has nothing to do with Trump. And that is unfortunate that people see it that way, or that they're trying to convince people to see it this way, that everything they've done has been funded by somebody else for a very long time now. And Ukraine has zero efforts, zero possibilities of getting out of this. Let's see. And meanwhile, on the other side of the aisle, another article the next day, or it might even been the same day. This is from the Russian side. The U.S. loan to Ukraine is theft of Russian money. Deputy Foreign Minister. U.S. Treasury Department announced Tuesday transfer of $20 billion, blah, blah, blah. Disbursement funded from Russian assets belonging to Russia's central bank could be classified as theft, said Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rybakov. The U.S. loan is part of blah, blah, blah. I'll tell you about the loan again. And here's his quote. I can say that this act falls under the classification of robbery on the part of an organization. What he meant is, like the mafia. I mean, on the part of the group of seven, Rybakov told journalists on Wednesday. The U.S. and its allies froze $300 billion in assets belonging to Russian central bank following escalation of the Ukraine conflict in 2022. In June, G7 members pledged $50 billion to Kiev with frozen assets to be used as collateral. So now they're going to use Russian assets as collateral. That was announced way back when they were in Switzerland or wherever they were, to help Kiev buy weapons, rebuild infrastructure. Agreement was finalized in October. Ukraine is expected to, theoretically, expected to repay the multi-billion loan over 40 years. Okay. And according to Secretary Treasury Janet Yellen, loan transfer will provide Ukraine critical infusion of support. The money covers around half of Kiev's current deficit. The country's state budget for next year, signed by Zelensky into law last month, anticipates revenue $49 billion, expenditure $87 billion, putting the overall deficit at $38 billion. So they've been in the negative for a while. Zelensky said Tuesday he was deeply grateful to Biden and Yellen. You think? You think he is? And Moscow has repeatedly accused the West of stealing its money. You know, that you can find everywhere. And I've read quite a few of those articles. I have a distrust of government when it's using other people's money to, and then the corruption in Ukraine, isn't even a factor here. That's not even discussed in any of it. And the fact that they're never going to win the war anyway, and that they don't have enough money, that $37 billion doesn't go in very far when each Patriot system costs $1 billion on its own, or it's more than $1 billion. I can't remember the exact amount, but a Patriot system costs $1 billion all by itself. Anyone's 25 of them. Well, he can't buy them on a loan. He doesn't have enough money, and so he's expecting those as a handout too. So that's not going to work. I had some BRICS news. I was talking on the BRICS and the alliance with AI. This is kind of interesting. New collaboration aimed at boosting technological partnerships between member states. The Russian Direct Investment Fund has announced the launch of an alliance within the BRICS group aimed at joint development of artificial intelligence. RDIF executive Kirill Dmitriev made the announcement on Wednesday in the sidelines of the AI Journey conference in Moscow. 20 companies from 6 member states, Russia, China, India, Brazil, Iran, and UAE, have already joined the AI Alliance. Among the 50-plus companies reported in favor of creating an alliance are universities, medical companies, pharmaceutical developments, financial, and many others in telecommunications. New alliance will focus on digital technology in the public and commercial sectors. I only bring this up because what people aren't necessarily realizing when it comes to what BRICS is attempting to accomplish is that BRICS is every bit as broad as the UN. What they are doing, as I've said before, is building an alternative to the UN. Not necessarily an opponent to the UN. They want to build an alternative with all the bells and whistles. As I've said before, they have organizations for education, organizations on standards in education, showing that for example, a college degree in one country will also be considered a college degree in another country. They have a banking sector. They have a development sector, which has loaned billions upon billions for infrastructure projects to other BRICS countries. And there were whole subgroups inside of BRICS discussing these things during the BRICS conference, and these are ongoing. Russia's term as the chief player in BRICS expires the end of this year, and Brazil steps in, and the Brazilian president steps in as the head of BRICS starting in January. And I'm interested, I haven't seen them yet, but Brazil will have a responsibility of heading BRICS and being in charge of all of the information that gets passed out. And in charge of all these subcommittees. So last year, I had hoped to get to quite a few more of the subcommittee groups, and or at least be on the periphery of it as a journalist holding a what do you call it, an attendance ticket to interview people and whatnot, like I did at BRICS. And I'm hoping to be able to do that in Brazil next year. And I want to set that up and go to the BRICS conference there. I think it's an important part. But all of these other subgroups are up and running right now. There's plenty of information on it. Continuing. This is particularly important given the fact that many Western countries are seeking to limit the access of BRICS countries to AI technologies, underlining the important role of this new alliance. The alliance could ensure that the BRICS group develops AI technologies faster and more powerfully through joint development. RDRF is Russia's sovereign wealth fund created by the government in 2011 to make investments to companies in high growth sectors of the Russian economy. And the AI and technology sector is growing quickly in Russia. And then they go on and tell you a little bit about BRICS and how it developed, and we don't need to go into that. This is interesting. There's been a lot of talks, especially after the discussion with Trump, between Trump, Zelensky, and Macron, when Zelensky left, like a little puppy on the side, and Macron and Trump were, strutting on out of the meeting, and Zelensky looked like a lost little puppy. You should watch that exit when they come out of the meeting they were in for a 20-minute meeting. It might have been a little longer, but it wasn't a whole lot. And then Orban has been circling around again. The Hungarian prime minister, Victor, has been circling around to various people, including Zelensky, including Putin, including Trump, to discuss with people. He's trying to take a role in ending this conflict in Ukraine. Frankly, I hope it pans out for him. And here it is. But Zelensky, so he proposed. Orban proposed. And I have another article I got to find, but because Orban visited Putin on the same issue. Orban proposed a Christmas ceasefire, an exchange of prisoners in full. But here's the title of the article: Zelensky rejects Christmas ceasefire, per Orban. Kiev also refused to carry out major prisoner exchange with Russia, according to the Hungarian prime minister. Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky has rejected a proposed Christmas ceasefire, large-scale prisoner swap with Russia. Now, I heard about this on Solovyov yesterday also. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said on Wednesday, Orban made the remarks on X in response to a post by Zelensky criticizing a phone conversation between Hungarian leader and Russian President Vladimir Putin earlier in the day. At the end of the Hungarian EU presidency, we made new efforts for peace. We proposed a Christmas ceasefire and a large-scale prisoner exchange. It is said that Zelensky clearly rejected and ruled this out today. We did what we could, said Orban on X. Zelensky accused Orban of merely seeking to burst his own personal image with his diplomatic efforts, and mockingly expressed hope that the Hungarian leader maybe at least won't call former Syrian President Bashar Assad in Moscow to listen to his hour-long lectures as well. So Zelensky's a rude person, in my opinion. Zelensky is always saying something rude. And he continues, no one should boost personal image at the expense of unity. Everyone should focus on shared success. Unity in Europe has always been key to achieving it. There can be no discussions about the war that Russia wages against Ukraine without Ukraine. Well, that's kind of interesting, I think. When I read this, I was going, well, you want to have your victory plan and your first it was a peace plan in Switzerland in June, and you want to talk about your peace plan. Then in September, when you came to the UN meetings, you had a victory plan that you wanted to discuss with everybody on the sidelines, both of which were rejected. And both, by the way, which did not include Russia, not at all. So shortly after the social media exchange, Dmitry Litvin, an aide to Zelensky, flatly denied that any contacts between Kiev and Budapest on proposed Christmas ceasefire and prisoner swap took place. As always, Ukraine has not authorized Hungary to do anything. As always, Ukraine is working on a daily basis to free prisoners for 2 weeks now. Relevant contacts have been ongoing regarding significant exchange by the end of the year. And Ukraine needs not PR, but fair peace, not blabber, but reliable security guarantees. And they're always looking for these security guarantees. And that means, in the eyes of Zelensky, this is the only thing it can possibly mean for Zelensky is membership in NATO. And that's what he keeps saying. That's where he's going to get his security guarantees. So the only thing he proposes is one of the things that Putin will never accept in a million years. And that's the only thing he's been saying all along. And he's been saying it in light of the fact that every member, well, quite a few members of NATO who can reject his membership have said, I will never support his membership or Ukraine's membership here either. Ukraine is too corrupt, number one. And we don't want to be at war with Russia. So that's how this has all come to pass, is you keep making these unacceptable demands, and instead of a peace talks, he wants to have some kind of an ultimatum meeting where they get to come together with Russia and have some sort of ultimatum. This is why I think it's going to be so difficult for Trump to end any war in Ukraine in 24 hours after taking office. He is trying right now. There is plenty of talk that he is making every effort that he can to get the sides to come together before that time. But there are plenty of people fighting against it. Everything that Biden is doing is against it. But an interesting thing I also heard today, and I don't have any source to back it up. I wasn't able to find it, but I heard it. It was on YouTube. And I remember Alexei Arestovich, the guy who I always quote. That's a Ukrainian guy. He gets on and he has his own channel, Alexei Arestovich, and people are talking about him being a replacement for Zelensky when Zelensky's booted out of office, which he will be. But this Arestovich, he was asked a question in an interview yesterday. It was kind of entertaining because the guy asked him, he said, Tucker Carlson was recently in Moscow interviewing Sergei Lavrov, foreign minister of Russia. What do you think he was really doing there? Was it really for the interview? There's been talk in Ukraine and in some other places that really Carlson was there at the behest of Donald Trump to give Lavrov a message from Donald Trump for Vladimir Putin regarding what they are willing to do about the war. He doesn't feel it necessary to come and it would be, and I think this is true too. You know, I think one of the first things, and there's an article I read here, somebody else has a similar thing, but one of the things that I've thought that the very first call that Donald Trump should make when he takes the big chair in the Oval Office, the very first call should be to Vladimir Putin and say, let's talk. When can I come to Russia? Or when can you come to America? And he'll have to go to Russia because there have to be some guarantees that they're not going to try to arrest Putin for some show. But Trump wouldn't be in any such danger because if you remember, Putin and a bunch of other Russian generals, Russian oligarchs, Russian popular people or high ups have arrest warrants for them, just like Netanyahu has an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court to arrest him wherever he show up. And who would trust that he wouldn't be arrested? Not so sure I would. So he should pick up that phone and say, when can I come? I'll be there this weekend, or something like that, and go meet and have a weekend and see if they can't figure out what they are going to do. The least important person in this equation is Zelensky. But if they brought Zelensky, Zelensky would know that it's over because especially if it was in Moscow, nobody'd arrest. I can't imagine anyway that they would arrest Zelensky in Moscow, especially if Trump was going to be president, or they could all go somewhere else. Who knows? But anyway, that is the message from Tucker. Allegedly, on the message from Tucker Carlson, what Arestovich said was kind of interesting, because Arestovich said that he wasn't sure he believed that that was the case. That he's not sure that Trump would give such authority to Carlson. Frankly, I never thought about it, but everybody's big on their conspiracies here in America too, and maybe that shouldn't surprise a person, because it was after a long presence at Mar-a-Lago that suddenly Tucker Carlson, who had been trying for months and months to get into Russia to speak to Lavrov, suddenly ends up in Russia speaking to Lavrov. And, people are playing games all the time, especially our government. And Trump is, and I don't want to call it playing games, but posturing. And the same thing could be said, because that interview with Lavrov, if you listen to it, and I played it last Friday, on the show here, that it was an hour and 20 minutes. If you didn't get a chance to listen to it on my show, you should go on and get the English version. Lavrov is a very good, well-spoken, grammatical English speaker. And it would be nice if people listened to what he had to say in that interview. It was pretty comprehensive about some of these issues. And Lavrov is always there's a lot of talk on a lot of places on the internet, and nobody in our foreign policy department, you sure as hell couldn't call Anthony Blinken a stellar Secretary of State. Hillary Clinton, I mean, come on. Look what we have had as our foreign policy guru. I got news for you. None of them on our side hold a candle to Sergei Lavrov. And he's been doing it either slightly before Putin took office or even after. In fact, I always thought that if Putin was not in charge, then he might be considered as one of the guys. But I think he's quite happy in the place that he is. He is always somewhere. He is always doing something. He was in Qatar a few days ago. There's a cut I have to play of him that is also in English that hopefully, let me see if I can play that while I'm finishing up the talking on him, because it's, the talk about him being a player on the global stage, and him being asked by, or Carlson being asked by, by Trump to give a message to Lavrov is kind of entertaining, and I'm not so sure that where is it? Well, JR closed up all of his. Oh, here it is. I'm on the wrong screen. But I'm trying to find his email here. Find my email and where it is. Here's the Sam case, and where is it? I want to get to that. Here it is. And I don't know if it just starts. Oh, here it is.
And on the other hand, those
hold on. I don't want it to echo, so I've got to do something on this.
Where the United Nations demand to respect sovereign equality of states is really
okay. It's not letting me go backward. I wonder why that is.
And many others.
Nope.
So
well, it's I'm trying to do it right, and it's not letting me to start from the beginning on that. So that's kind of odd. But there, if you get a chance, it's called Lavrov's speech. It's on the Times of India site, and I do like reading the Times of India as well. It's Lavrov's speech, Russian foreign ministers' warnings about the U.S. and Turkey and in Syria, and it's a pretty good listen. He's talking about the world attacks on Russian structure, like I was telling you a little bit before, about how since they're not the West is not being very successful in Ukraine with their efforts, there have all completely failed. That they're making efforts on the Syrian side, and he's warning advising Turkey and the U.S. and Israel to tread carefully over there, because it appears, and it looks kind of fishy to me too, that Israel is suddenly over there also. I think Israel is making moves that they're not backing out of there. If they keep getting these areas, they've already said that they're not leaving, and so I'm fearful that things over there are going to get worse, not better, even under Trump. And it's exactly what I was worried about before, is that we have to go out and prove that we're the biggest, baddest under Trump, and why I've always only been a 75%er and not a 100%er with him. Well, more on the BRICS. There was another good article I read about Xi Jinping warning the West and the U.S. that a trade war isn't in anybody's favor. There's been talk, heard that, and I in fact even saw an article on it, that Donald Trump, for the first time ever, has invited a Chinese official. He invited Xi to his inauguration. Now that would be huge. That would be extremely huge if that took place. The only thing larger would be to invite Putin as well. You want to signify a change that you're going to take on the deep state. Bring them all in. Bring in the leaders. Bring in all the leaders of the BRICS countries. Why don't you invite Modi? Why don't you from India? Why don't you invite Putin? Why don't you invite Xi? Why don't you invite I don't even remember the name of the guy from South Africa, and the president from Brazil, and his name I forget as well. And so it'll be interesting what happens. But here's Beijing is ready to work out its differences with Washington and seek mutually beneficial relations, Xi Jinping has said. Now, I'm here to tell you that at the BRICS conferences and everything you hear from Xi Jinping has always been that we are fundamentally different. Everybody understands that, but that we don't seek confrontation with you. We seek mutually beneficial relationships. We seek non-interference, non-aggression, but mutually beneficial relationships. And you hear that everywhere. This we're seeking for profit for both of us. That is what we're after. And you hear it from Xi Jinping all of the time, that this is what he's after. But specifically, he says a trade war is a bad idea. Chinese leaders spoke on Tuesday, heads of major international economic organizations, at the 1+10 Dialogue Forum in Beijing. The attendees included the heads of the BRICS, plus New Development Bank, and the New Development Bank is the competitor for the World Bank. But the International Monetary Fund was there, the World Bank is there, and the World Trade Organization. So they're all in the same place, concurrents and also competitors with each other. Beijing is willing to maintain dialogue, broaden cooperation, manage its differences with Washington, and hopes that the U.S. will do the same. Tariffs, trade wars, and sci-tech wars go against the trend of history and the laws of economics, and there can be no winners, he said. Last month, Chinese leaders stressed that any attempt to stifle Chinese economic growth would be a red line for Beijing and its relationship with Washington. That's in response to Trump's, I'm going to tariff you 100%. Neither superpower should try to remodel the other according to one's own will, or deprive the other of a legitimate right to internal development. U.S. president. I'm not going to read the rest, but it's an interesting article. There are olive branches being laid out, and if Trump really did invite Xi to come over for the inauguration, that might be a sign of good things to come. Here it is. In fact, that's the next article that shows up on my little list. Trump invites Xi to his inauguration, per CBS. The Chinese leader has previously attended, no Chinese leader has previously attended a U.S. presidential inauguration. So, briefly, U.S. President elect Donald Trump has invited Chinese Xi Jinping to attend his inauguration. The offer was made in early November, shortly after his election victory, multiple sources told the media outlet. Remains unclear whether Xi has accepted. I hope he does, truthfully. In a recent, it would go a long way toward me feeling good about what Trump is trying to accomplish. If you invite you want to call them enemies. I'm not so sure they're not, but that doesn't mean you should treat them as enemies. What is that? I always had a lawyer friend tell me, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Well, that's part of the reason, that would certainly be a step in that direction, to try to get to know or get to have them on the same playing field. In a recent NBC News interview, Trump said he got along very well with Xi, and they had communicated the previous week. Trump's team has suggested hosting other leaders to the Capitol on January 20th, in addition to Xi. While ambassadors and diplomats are typically invited, State Department records since 1874 indicate that no foreign leader has ever attended a transfer of power ceremony. That I did not know. But the olive branch to China comes despite Trump's incoming administration featuring several hawks on Beijing, including Marco Rubio as secretary. I don't like the hawks. I mean, that really frustrates me. I don't want these global hawks that are out there trying to take over the world. I believe it's a mistake. It's been a mistake for 30 years, and we don't need more of the same. We need less. We need to. And I'm not saying withdraw, but I'm saying certainly tone it down a little bit. And we never do. President-elect vowed to hit the country with an additional 10% tariff above any other tariffs unless it takes action against trafficking of fentanyl, major contributor to opioids. Now, I agree that these are big problems, and hopefully all he is doing is posturing. Trump is. Now, I'm not saying they're not a legitimate weapon of trade between countries, and in an effort to get countries to do what they're going to do. But it seems like it's always, that we're always going this way. During his campaign, he also threatened additional tariffs in excess of 60% on U.S. imports from China. But and this letter goes on. The rest you've already heard. Kind of funny because a new one just popped up. This is kind of funny. Here's an article today. Ukrainians are increasingly searching for Russian porn. That's another article from today. That's interesting. I don't know about the truth of that. I don't speak to the truth of any of this. These are sources that come from various different places. Like I said the other day, most of my sources come from local or U.S. and foreign media sources, and I pick and choose which ones I'm going to read and put out here. Here's an interesting one. Zuckerberg gives Trump $1 million. Meta has donated the money U.S. President-elect's inauguration fund, hoping as a push for more positive relations. Meta Platforms owner Facebook and Instagram donated $1 million to inauguration fund of U.S. President Donald Trump. Company spokesman confirmed. Contribution being seen as part of a move by CEO Mark Zuckerberg to improve his historically tense relationship with the incoming Republican. I love it. How do you not love it? That's freaking funny. let's see. So here's one about Russian oil from Politico. EU has failed to cut energy ties with Russia, per the commissioner. Dan Jorgensen has pledged to present a new plan targeting Russian oil, gas, and nuclear fuel, reported by Politico. EU has failed to overcome its dependence on Russian energy and needs a new plan to wean itself off of Moscow's supplies. The bloc's new energy chief told Politico Thursday. In his first interview since taking the post, Jorgensen highlighted the growth of Russian liquefied natural gas purchases. Well, where else are you going to get it? And what are you going to ship it in a tanker from the U.S. at 4 times the cost? I'm not so sure. The share of Russian liquid natural gas on the EU market reached 20% this year, according to the Agency for Cooperation of Energy Regulators, despite Brussels' pledge to stop consuming Russian fuel by 2027. It's obvious to everybody that something new needs to happen because now it's beginning to go in the wrong direction, the new commissioner said. He pledges to present a tangible roadmap that will include efficient tools and means for us to solve the remaining part of the problem. Is it really a problem to buy gas cheaper for yourselves and your country than another? Part of me is being facetious, and part of me is being, what is the point of all this? You want Russia's resources. They're cheaper than everywhere else, and you got pipelines running into Europe in 2 different locations. In fact, 3 if you hadn't blown up Nord Stream. You would have sources from different locations that would make it cheap. And if you bought larger volumes, it would be even cheaper. Isn't that correct? And they're selling it anyway. Get your share of it. It's all going to India, it's going to China, and still plenty is going to Europe. And you instead would pay more, deprive your people of the ability to use it. Frankly, I just don't understand it. The new measures, he said, will target gas primarily, but also oil and nuclear, and will be formulated by mid-March. He's taken office in January as well, noting that 5 EU countries still rely on Russia for nuclear fuel. EU declared its intention to end its dependence on Russian energy supplies following the escalation of the Ukraine conflict in 2022. Supplies of higher cost U.S. fuel have replaced much of the cheap pipeline gas that was previously delivered by Russia. However, efforts have stalled in recent months, and the EU continues to buy billions of euros worth of Russian gas each month. In 2024, the bloc is expected to import 10% more LNG from Russia than in 2023, according to any energy analytics firm Kepler. Politico added that any plan to sever energy ties with Russia in the next few years would be strongly opposed by EU members that are heavily reliant on these imports, in particular Hungary and Slovakia, whose Viktor Orban and Robert Fico have resisted energy sanctions on Russia. Well, Ukraine would be against it too, by the way, because those pipelines go straight through Ukraine. Jorgensen's proposal, also likely to come just weeks after the contract for Russian gas transit through Ukraine, is set to expire on December 31. The EU still receives around 5% of its gas from Russia via Ukraine's gas network, according to the latest. Last month, Bloomberg warned of an imminent energy crisis in Western and Central Europe due to the latest sanctions against Russia's Gazprom Bank, the primary bank for energy-related transactions. The outlet said rapidly depleting gas reserves in Europe and potential supply cuts from Russia, because Russia said, fine, we'll just cut it off. We got plenty of people buying it, and they do. And so I don't, this is foolish, no matter how you slice it. Cuts from Russian, supply cuts from Russia threaten to exacerbate an already difficult situation. No doubt, folks. But, if it was smart, everybody'd be doing it, right? Let's see. Oh, here was a good one. I like this too. And it's really not on my usual topic. It's about Canada. But Canadian province will retaliate if Trump hikes tariffs. Premier Doug Ford of Ontario warns that he could cut power to his southern neighbor, the United States, if Donald Trump makes good on his threats. The head of Ontario, Doug Ford, has warned that the Canadian province could stop supplying electricity to the U.S. if President Trump follows through his threat to impose sweeping tariffs on Canadian products. Trump has vowed to impose 25% tariffs on all goods coming from Canada and Mexico unless those countries stem the flow of illegal immigrants and drugs into the U.S. That's kind of funny. Speaking to reporters following a virtual meeting with other provincial and territorial leaders, as well as Prime Minister Trudeau on Wednesday, Ford said, "We'll go to the full extent, depending on how far this goes. We will go to the extent of cutting off their energy, going to Michigan, going to New York, and over to Wisconsin." He added, he did not want this to happen, but his number one job is to protect Ontario, Ontarians, and Canadians as a whole. Well, good for him. I'm not sure if it's going to work, and I'm not sure that Trump was serious anyway, but hopefully somebody will start taking some efforts to stem the flow of illegal migrants into the United States. That would be very nice. Let's see. That one I really like, but I think I'm going to read it. Here we go. This is the one I wanted to get to. Dmitry Trenin is the author. Dmitry Trenin is a research professor at the Higher School of Economics and a lead research fellow at the Institute of World Economy and International Relations. He is also a member of the Russian International Affairs Council. Dmitry Trenin. And Dmitry Trenin writes an article called "Why Trump Needs to Call Putin on Day One." Now, I've read this. The Kellogg plan, and I'm going to read it to you too. The Kellogg plan looks totally unacceptable to Moscow in its leaked form, but it's still good to talk. The practice of leaking proposed diplomatic plans is standard in Russian political culture. Now, remember, this is coming from a Russian. A professional Russian, making the recent publication of a reported framework for resolving the Ukraine conflict, allegedly authored by U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's pick for special envoy to Kiev Kellogg, unsurprising. Such moves often serve to test the likely reactions of key players before formal talks begin. Again, posturing. From a realpolitik perspective, it would make sense for Trump, after his inauguration, to call Russian President Vladimir Putin and propose sending Kellogg or another senior figure to Moscow for negotiations. I've been saying that forever. While the exact content of Trump's future proposal remains unclear, its general theme, peace from a position of strength, seems obvious. If Trump takes this step, it's likely that Putin will agree to receive the envoy and assign a senior Russian official for the meeting. And the success of any talks, however, will depend entirely on the substance of Washington's proposal. So far, they've been rejected. I've read some of what Vladimir Putin has to say, what Lavrov has to say about these leaked ideas about peace talks. Judging by what has circulated in the media so far, the terms being floated are clearly unacceptable to Moscow. I've been reading the same thing. Russia has its own clearly defined vision for resolving the Ukrainian crisis, one focused on addressing the root causes of the conflict, not simply managing its symptoms, which is the war. The terms for negotiation with Ukraine have been publicly stated, repeatedly reiterated by Russian officials. For the U.S., the first I can't read. I shouldn't talk like that. For the U.S., the first step toward meaningful talks should be ceasing its involvement in the war altogether. Well, maybe that's true. Any hypothetical negotiations between Moscow and Washington would center not on Ukraine, but on the broader military and political stability in Europe and beyond. If Trump is prepared to pursue this agenda, meaningful progress may be possible. If not, he will face a likely choice: escalate an increasingly dangerous war or shift the responsibility for supporting Kyiv onto European NATO allies. Now, that's already in the works. If you've paid any attention to this, Trump is also, whether he's posturing or for real, he is still saying that NATO and European countries have to play a larger share. He's also forcing them to increase their budgets in this regard. And there are talks that many of the countries have already done that. There was a meeting recently in the EU Council where they were all talking about their increased budgets and their proposals and showing their new budgets. So that's interesting. But neither option is ideal. German Chancellor Scholz faces a tough February election, with polls suggesting he is vulnerable. Nobody's for this war, by the way. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is eager to project global Britain ambitions abroad. At the same time, French President Macron is presently a lame duck and doesn't even have a functioning government. All will struggle to sustain Western Europe's commitment to this war without firm U.S. leadership. For Trump, the clock will be ticking from the moment he enters the White House. Phone call to Moscow may be a necessary first step, if only to see how much room remains for diplomacy in a world increasingly shaped by force. Well, it's kind of like this guy reads my mind. And this article was first published in Rossiyskaya Gazeta, a Russian publication. And I think that there's certainly some truth to this, because from my point of view, the U.S. always ignores what other people want, what other people say, what other people demand. And instead, they're off in their own little bubble somewhere, and they come up with a plan which they don't discuss with anybody. They don't include anybody. They have their own little plan in a bubble, and then they send over some little guy in a bubble like Antony Blinken, and he takes his little bubble plane and he goes over and he meets with his bubble people over there, and he gets to talk to somebody, and then he unloads this alleged plan and wonders why nobody's interested in doing what he's suggesting. Well, it's because diplomacy is dead in America. There has been no diplomacy. There might have been under Trump previous. I truly admit that I wasn't following as closely as I've been following for the last 4 years, but I still kept track. And it didn't seem that even then we were doing much in the way of diplomacy. We were doing it, like we always do, by force. It's interesting whether that is the case or not. Hello, caller. Can you hear me? Oh, wait, I got to merge the calls. 1 second. Sorry about that. Let me merge them. I have the wrong key up. Sorry about that. Are you with me, caller?
I am.
Sorry about that. I pushed the wrong button. I'm still when I switch the call, I just want to make sure that you can hear. Hello and welcome to the show. What can I do for you?
Well, I think this is what Trump's trying to say. Mir, both men, mire, fake it.
Oh, mir siem, and I didn't understand the rest.
I said, mir, both men, mire, fake it.
Uh-huh. Mir to peace to everyone in the world. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, world peace now.
World peace now. Priyama сейчас. Right? Priyama means right now. Сейчас means now. Priyama сейчас means right now. Сейчас is now, but right now is priyama сейчас.
Yeah. So that's my rough translation. I'm going to try to learn a Russian phrase at least daily, maybe weekly, and check in with you on that.
Well, I have some good ones. And if you're looking for a good way to learn the Russian language, I was truly lucky in the way I learned Russian. I went to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, and I had a very good teacher, and I was extremely lucky that I had this teacher because I was an experimental class. I remember thinking on day one that I was screwed, because they gave this guy an experimental class. There was 200 in our class, but each class was divided into 20 classes of 10, right? And so this guy was the only one that had been given a class, and we learned Russian by pictures. And he would put two pictures on the wall, and you had to tell the difference between picture number 2 and picture number 1. And it was nothing major. Like the first picture would be a man standing in a room, and the second picture would be a woman standing in the room. Well, the difference is that the person on the right is a woman standing in a room, and you had to learn a sentence that said a woman is standing in the room. And so you learned it by pictures. You learned an entire sentence. You didn't know why, but you knew the sentence meant X. And then when grammar came up later, you understood it a little bit better because of anyway, you don't need to go into all that stuff, but there's a program kind of similar to that if you can afford it, it's geez, I just lost. Why can't I remember the name of it? It just left me. It's the biggest one out there, and I can't remember the name of it, but it is on my telephone, and maybe I can find it through that. But it's through. It's not Babbel. It's the one that came out before Babbel. Nope, it's better. And let's see here.
It's the word for everything everywhere. It's
I can't believe I forget it. I can't believe I can't remember it. And it drives me crazy that I can't remember. Here it is. Languages. Rosetta Stone.
Rosetta Stone. That's it. Rosetta Stone has a big meaning beyond just
Well, the Rosetta Stone was a stone they found somewhere in the Middle East that had different languages listed on it, and it was presumed to be like an interpreter's device when they found it that would help them translate different things. But they also, and I bought it, and they've changed their pricing structure over the years. I bought it for Chinese quite a few years ago. I bought it for Arabic when I was living in Qatar, and I did a little bit of learning how to go to restaurants and stuff like that. And I learned a little bit of language. I bought it for French, and I used it a little bit. But then they changed the pricing, so you can buy for all languages, and you can download it on your phone. I can't remember, but I paid $300-400 for each version. But now you can download the version, and it comes with a bunch. There are many, many more options, and I can tell you that way is the closest that I have seen and found that is very similar to the way I learned it. Now, the way I learned Russian, and I'm telling you, it focuses on the spoken language. And the trouble with learning a language from school is a lot more of it from a typical school. A lot more of it focuses on reading, writing instead of on spoken word, which is how children learn. Children learn through example, through pictures, and through things like that. So the way that I learned, I was extremely lucky to have been able to learn it the way I was learning it in a time when nobody learned it that way. And I was. And I credit it with the reason that my spoken Russian, was far better than 97% of military linguists. My Russian was better in spoken than it was in written or listening. And in those times, we did far more listening, through headsets of things they were saying, because, we were trying to interpret the things that they said, and very little speaking because we weren't friends. And so when it came up for the INF treaty, I was very blessed to have learned Russian the way that I did, because my scores were among the top in the military, only because I had a teacher that focused on it the way he did. So if I had a recommendation, it'd be get something that is similar to it, especially for a language as difficult as Russian. Russian is not easy. And so anyway, I didn't mean to bombard you with that story, but I appreciate you calling in. I thank you for listening to my show.
It's a good story, and it's good advice, because I too have traveled down the road to different languages, and the best way to do it is conversationally. And then if you want to get, become a English to Spanish, or an English to Russian, or vice versa, then you start to conjugate nouns and verbs and diagram sentences, and use posts, and use tenses. So Sam, I appreciate you very much. You're a treasure. You're a true treasure, and I'm going to make it an effort to at least learn a phrase a day. Tomorrow when I call in, I'm going to learn how to say, "Good afternoon, my friend."
Добрый день, друг мой.
There you go, brother. I really appreciate it. I really do.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Merry Christmas.
Yep. Merry Christmas to you and have a good day.
You too.
Yep. And there he goes. I don't touch the screen because I don't want to mess it up. I don't touch the phone thing until it pops up. I just don't want to mess it up. So, uh, you know, learning languages is a very interesting thing. And if you know, in all seriousness, I learned more about grammar learning Russian than I ever did in high school or college, because Russian, their grammar rules really mean something. I'm not saying that ours don't, but I never understood it. I just knew that's how you said it. And you know, English grammar was a class to get through. In Russian, it actually, the rules most of the time apply. In English, the rules never apply. There's exceptions everywhere. It drove me bananas, but they were there anyway. I digress a little bit. That's not really where I wanted to go. Let's see. That one I'm going to skip. Here, I'm going to skip that one too. Well, maybe not. Maybe I have time to do this. I only have a few minutes left. We'll see if I can get through this, but it's a longer article. No, I'm not going to do it. And I'm not going to do that one. So I will do this one. There's been a lot of discussion, you know, that Kiev is, if you are aware of this, and I think you are because I said something about it the other day. Kiev is very much on the run. They are on the ropes, however you want to say it. They are on the ropes, and it's not going well. And so the U.S., like I told you a couple of days ago, has been trying to, and the West in general, has been trying to force the Kiev regime to lower the limit to 18 years old. You may have heard this before. Their current mobilization efforts only go to the age of 25. And so the Ukrainians don't have enough people to pick from. They've lost so many men, and so many people have run from the country that they cannot mobilize more people. They're trying to get 200,000 more men mobilized by April when the spring comes, which means they got to start collecting them now so they can train them up for that time, so they're ready to hit the ground when the snows melt and when spring is upon us. But then they'll be all full of mud and fighting, and those times are really bad too. So the big push is we need more people, we need more arms, we need more money, as usual. And none of it can they pay for. They can't even get more men. So the proposal has been they're cruising around trying to get guarantees from NATO because they know Trump's coming, and they want NATO and, in fact, the U.S. to guarantee that we will send troops to their aid and help them push back the Russians. One of the proposals is actually to have NATO come in, push back the Russians to the 2022. This was Maria Zakharova said this morning on her daily briefing, and she's the press secretary for Russia. And she said in her daily meeting that Kiev had announced that they would now accept Russia falling back to lines of 2022 that were agreed upon in Turkey in April of 2022, right before Boris Johnson and the West said, no, keep on fighting. You got plenty of men, and we'll keep giving you some money and some weapons. And so now they're trying to, the backup plan is, go back to the places that you accepted in 2022, fall back to those lines, and we can talk some peace if we can join NATO. And then came the discussion about, but you're never going to be able to join NATO. So stop. Quit talking about it. It's not going to happen. Sakharova is pretty funny. I like listening to her, and she's pretty sharp. She's pretty, and her English is pretty good if she ever uses it, but she rarely uses it. Like Lavrov, I was surprised to learn that they speak English as well as they do Russian. That was awesome, and so you can hear him anyway. In keeping with that request for the West and for NATO and NATO countries to send their own soldiers to fight against Russia, which none of them are going to do. They're not going to pick a direct fight with Russia. They're going to have Ukraine do that. But that's what Ukraine is pushing for. Poland says it will not send troops to Ukraine. Speculation has been growing that Western nations could put boots on the ground if a ceasefire is reached between Kiev and Moscow. So they want to have a buffer zone with NATO and U.S. peacekeepers as well. So this article I shall read in its entirety, and then we will wrap it up for today. But it's an interesting article, and people should listen to this point of view. Poland has currently no plans to send troops to Ukraine. The country's Prime Minister Donald Tusk, I love it, has said as speculation grows surrounding the potential deployment of peacekeeping troops by Western nations in the event of a ceasefire. Tusk made the remarks Thursday during a press conference with French President Emmanuel Macron, who is in Warsaw on an official visit. One of Ukraine's strongest backers, Poland is about to assume EU Council presidency next month. To cut off speculation about the potential presence of this or that country in Ukraine after reaching ceasefire, decisions concerning Poland will be made in Warsaw and only in Warsaw, Tusk said. For the time being, we are not planning such action, he stressed. The remarks follow a range of media reports that suggest France and the UK have been considering deploying troops to Ukraine. The force is reportedly supposed to act as peacekeepers to observe a ceasefire in the event Moscow and Kiev engage in talks. Topic has also been invoked by Germany leadership, yet Chancellor Scholz has said the deployment of his country's troops to Ukraine was out of the question before a real ceasefire was established. Earlier this month, an unnamed high-ranking NATO official who spoke to state-funded news outlet Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, that's our version, Western version of RT News and Voice of America, suggested that the true goal of potential deployment was ensuring that European NATO members still have a say in Ukraine's conflict resolution after President Trump takes office in January. Now, that's an interesting take. I like that. Tusk acknowledged that the issue of sending troops in the context of a ceasefire peace deal had been raised in his one-on-one meeting with Macron, telling journalists, "We have discussed it. Both Macron and Tusk have said it's up to Ukrainians to decide when peace talks can start." The French president confirmed to media that talks with Tusk had focused on Ukraine and the day after the war without giving further detail. According to the report Wednesday in Polish newspaper, can't read it, Rzeczpospolita, that cited diplomatic sources, Macron was traveling to Warsaw to discuss with Tusk an idea of sending 40,000 strong peacekeeping force composed of troops from foreign countries. Russia has ruled out freezing the conflict. I've said this a million times, stressing that all goals of its military operation, including Ukrainian neutrality, demilitarization, denazification, must be met. Moscow has insisted any settlement is only possible if Ukraine withdraws its forces from Russian territory, including former Ukrainian regions, ensures the rights of Russian-speaking population, and adheres to neutrality, which, by the way, they agreed to do in 2014. Might even been before that. I might have the date wrong. But all of this before Kiev started bombing its own people in the Donbass region. They were supposed to be independent, sort of independent. They had the right to, like a state, but the state was more supreme according to the Minsk Accords, and those were completely ignored. And the Russian speakers were not allowed to speak Russian. They were not allowed to learn Russian. There's plenty of these things. Oh, I don't want to repeat any of them all, and I've run over just slightly, and for which I apologize. But you are listening to Samuel Trapp. This is international flavor. I very much appreciate you being on the program.